of course, big congratulations and compliments to the iFOREST team on this report. About 20 years ago, I had gone to Chhattisgarh for field work on how farmers are affected by climate change. And it coincided with what is called Nautapa, the 9 days of the year when it is the hottest. And we got a sense of how people over there are already vulnerable to existing climate risks. Plus, the impacts of climate change are growing. We have a new report from the IPCC expected at the end of this month. And we already know from the last IPCC report that there is growing recognition that it's not just a one-off event, but compound and cascading extreme events. Just like we, of course, big locust attack, a cyclone, and a pandemic, of course, big interacting with each other. So the first point I wanted to make is that these are vulnerable communities that you are drawing attention to. They're marginalized communities. And the issue of this low carbon energy transition will be an additional stress on top of all the other stresses that are being faced by them. I wanted to actually, with the model that we have, we explore two different scenarios of phasing down coal for the country as a whole. I mean, how fast can we go? One option is to phase down coal by, say, around 2050. Another option is try to do it faster and try to phase out coal by, say, the early 2040s. And we find that there are direct effects, of course, on the jobs. In the 2050 phase out scenario, there will be 1.1 million, coal sector jobs, coal mining jobs, specifically, that will be lost. In the more aggressive scenario, you would have 1.5 million coal mining jobs lost and 500,000 jobs lost in this decade alone. So this has major implications for the ability of the government to provide safety nets or some other form of compensation. On the positive side, of course, you have water savings. So thermal power plants use up a lot of water compared to solar plants. So we find that right now, 2.5 billion cubic meters of water are being used all over the country by coal-based power plants. And most of this can be saved if we switch to solar. There will be health benefits, of course, something like a total of 9 million premature deaths avoided over the period of the next 30 years if we were to have this phase down of coal. So definitely there are positives and negatives to be planned for, but there are specific choices also to be made. For example, the choice between phasing out coal by 2040 versus 2050 has another financial implication. If you were to replace coal by renewable energy, how would you balance the grid? Would you invest in a lot of battery storage? This, according to our calculations, would require something like $35 billion in just this decade. Or would you invest in natural gas peaker plants in order to provide grid flexibility? This is the kind of choice which we have to make. Do we manage to get the additional financing? Or do we create perhaps a legacy infrastructure of natural gas, which we don't really require in later decades and which might in fact crowd out renewable energy or battery storage in the decade of the 2040s. The final sort of point that I would really like to make is that, along with all this, and this has been highlighted very well in your report, that the dependence on fossil fuel tax revenues is so high in our country. For the center as a whole, of the national government as a whole, it's 25% of our tax revenues. But for states like Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, and for districts of the sort that you mentioned, the coal royalties are so crucial in terms of the government's ability to invest in education and health. So the kind of just transition deal that South Africa and other countries have really created with political leadership from the absolute top are really going to be very important for making this a success. For the district specifically, what I would argue is that we need to look at the next generation and providing opportunities for economic diversification. And this need not be only energy sector green jobs, there can even be land-based green jobs around the restoration economy, the land restoration economy. So we really need to think of it from the perspective of women in particular. Can we provide them with decent jobs? And I know these are very difficult issues, and I certainly don't have any answers. All I can do is really just draw attention to some of these challenges, and perhaps learn from examples, from other countries, from other parts of our country. But as people working on climate change policy, I think what we always hold ourselves responsible for is that we have existing inequities and vulnerabilities in our economy and our society. If climate action is going to worsen these inequities, or if it is going to worsen the resource scarcities or make vulnerable people more vulnerable, then that is not just climate action. That's not fair or equitable climate action. So we have to have additional policies in place to make sure that the low carbon transition is also a just transition.